this is Openmike, and we are back for the second segment of our program. At the end of our first segment, we were just discussing the possibilities of our fishers improving the kind of crafts that they use. And I pose a question to Mr. Walters. In his opinion, based on his experience over the years, what is the next step we need to take to assist those individuals? And that is, should the fishing crafts be slightly larger and more accommodating so that they can spend at least 2 to 3 nights outside in the event that they are successful, so they don't have to rush back, because it's a cost every time you go out to the fishing bands of a lot of fuel going back and forth. So I will let Mr. Walters just explain that to me, but he did indicate that it is possible to do that with the assistance of a development bank, but these facilities no longer exist, and therefore I think that's where the private sector needs to come in, because you know the fishermen play a very important role in St. Lucia, and whatever assistance can be given out to those individuals would be great. Just before I go to Mr. Walters again, he did indicate that Mr. Donnelly has just brought in I think a 40-foot boat, and he intends using it for that purpose. But another area which Mr. Walters highlighted is the fact that Grenada seems to be way ahead of us as far as the fishing industry is concerned, for more reasons than one. The first being that their people seem to be either well-trained or better trained, and secondly, that they have better boats, better equipped boats than St. Lucia. And I find it hard to believe that an island like Grenada, not too far from us, could be so well advanced in the fishing industry while we are staying behind. And I'm only hoping that with the recent legislation of free movement, that our fishermen and fishers can probably touch base with their Grenada counterparts and see what they can do to enhance the industry. Mr. Walters.
Yeah, well, like I told you, Mr. Donnelly did buy a larger vessel, and the intention was to have a captain and a deckhand, like a mate. So you'd have a captain in the wheelhouse training
from Grenada.
From Grenada,
yeah.
Training a couple local guys,
right,
in
that area,
in the wheelhouse, because you have equipment in there. You have fish finders and echo sounders and navigational aids that you need to train people to use. And we did identify, when we were working with Mr. Donnelly, we did identify a couple of young men who have the capacity to work in the wheelhouse and be captain. And then you'd need somebody to work on the deck with the crew to teach them how to set. Although, I mean, our fishermen know how to set long lines.
yes,
But on a larger vessel, we need to ensure that they do it right and that we're catching the right fish. So I don't think we have a problem with training our people.
it's just a matter of putting it in place.
Putting it in place and getting the fishermen the money to buy these boats. We're not talking about large boats. In Grenada, you have 25, 30 footers that are organized in such a way that they can catch.
So
and what they're catching is large tuna.
We can bring
tuna over 100 pounds. I mean, what we call albacore.
Yes.
The large tuna, and we have a lot of it in our waters. I mean, all of the southern Caribbean.
Do the Grenadians come as far as up by St. Lucia?
No, they don't.
They don't need that, because they have all the fish that they want.
They have the fish right there. The fish.
Now, Horace, another thing that worries me tremendously is the Choiseul complex. I have gone down there. That complex was built, I think it's around 2011 and finished in 2012. But within 2 years after that complex was finished.
It would have been 2004.
I'm sorry, 2004,
Or somewhere
2005.
3, 4,
And so it's about 10 years now since that complex has been finished. But within 2 years after it was finished, there's an engineering problem whereby the silt, no one knows from where. On one of my shows, I had Mr. Lester Arnold, who was the past engineer, and he indicated to me that a lot of work was done in trying to find out where the silt was originating from. He was not prepared to guarantee that it came from the Soufriere River, but there's a certain amount of silt drift that's coming down. And we're talking of thousands of cubic yards, because I know for a fact that several thousand cubic yards were already taken away. And I was there just 3 days ago. And the amount of silt, of sand that's on that beach is unbelievable. But the worrying part of the whole situation is the fact that the bay created by the Japanese is completely sealed off by silt. Now, what has happened there, based on the fact a lot of the extra sewer from Choiseul goes into the bay, that part has become very, very polluted. And we are going to show you a tape shortly of what is going on down there. And the fishers have indicated that they're developing a rash when they put their feet in that water, plus the fact that they have to drag their boats over the sand, and it's damaging their boats, and it's costing them as much as $5,000 at a time to fix their boats. Now, as we said earlier, one of the reasons why these complexes were built, so the fishermen would not have to drag their boats over the sand and the stones, and to save them, because it's very costly to do those things. And when a fisherman has to go out, sell his fish, buy petrol, pay people to go out, having to go and maintain the boat far more often than it is. It's very disheartening. And I'm very concerned and worried about those guys down there, because not only did it happen, it didn't happen 2 years ago. It's now nearly 9 to 10 years. Governments have gone and governments have come, and the problem still exists. And last week, Wednesday, I brought in an engineer from Barbados who explained to me what I already thought should be done, is that an additional groin should be built to stop that silt from coming in. Now, watching the tape, a fisherman actually gave his take on the matter, and talking to you earlier, explaining the situation, your take and his take seem to be at par with each other. You know, I know it's something that's not within your control, but you have seen the problem down there. And has any matter been or were any thoughts given as to how they're going to address the situation?
Well, I think this is a complex situation that needs attention. And having worked very closely with the Japanese, the engineers, I know that in all of the developments that we undertook during my time, Dennery, Vierfort, due diligence was given to the coastal engineering. Those of us who know Choiseul very well will recall that before the facility was built, the fishermen actually pulled their boats up close to what used to be the old gas station below that hill.
Right.
And it's like VG. Those of us who play and run on the VG beach will know that every month you have a buildup of sand and then a dispersal of the sand. Then you have the longshore drift, the coastal currents going up and down from north to south. Mm-hmm. And in Choiseul, it was a similar activity taking place. You had the sand filling up the lower part of the Choiseul beach and filling up the upper part. What I was a bit surprised about was the opening, the entrance of the port is in the way of that longshore drift. You always have sand in suspension, always, all the time. There's always sand in suspension. And once that sand gets deposited, it stays. So that sand moving from north to south, entering the port, will accumulate and build up. And that's what has happened there. I think the opening is either in the wrong location or the breakwater did not go far enough into the Caribbean Sea to throw that sand in suspension out into the sea. So that sand keeps going into the port. And this is what I think the problem is. When I saw this, I thought, wow, this is something that needs to be remedied, but it's an expensive job.
Yeah. Well, you know,
and I think there's got to be the diplomacy, there's got to be the approach to the government of Japan to address it as if they would a new project, because it would be a costly exercise.
Yeah. Horace, we're going to take a break. This is the end of the second segment of our program. We'll be right back.